Hello, welcome to AFRITALES by Moonlight. Please show us some love by subscribing to our channel, leaving a comment, giving us a like, and sharing with your friends. Your support truly means the world to us. Thank you. She remembered the night the power went out. It was almost midnight, and she was hunched over a stack of papers on the small wooden table in their cramped one-bedroom apartment. The single fluorescent bulb overhead had flickered, and then darkness took over. Unable to afford the electricity bill for the month, she sighed and reached for the half-melted candle she kept for emergencies. Its flame threw dancing shadows on the peeling walls, illuminating her weary face and the tension in her eyes. They had just moved to the city, filled with hopes as bright and warm as the candlelight that now struggled against the darkness. He had big plans, a marketing consultancy he wanted to launch from the ground up. She, determined to support him, had taken odd jobs, cleaning offices after hours, handing out flyers, and sometimes doing laundry for neighbors in the building. Anything to scrap together a few extra coins. In those early days, she wore her faith like armor. She had stood at the altar and promised to be there in sickness and in health, in good times and in bad. She'd never imagined how quickly the challenges would arrive. While he spent hours in cafes pitching to small business owners, she would rush home to cook whatever she could afford. Simple meals of rice and beans, sometimes a thin soup made from leftover vegetables. They weren't glamorous dinners, but they kept them going. Her determination to see him succeed became the bedrock of their struggling household. By day, she organized his leads in an old folder. By night, she wrote down every expense they incurred in a notebook, ensuring nothing slipped through the cracks. When she wasn't busy with that, she'd find small freelance tasks online, data entry, transcription, just enough to pay for internet at the cheapest rate. Every penny was pinched, every dollar accounted for, because they both believed the future would be worth these sacrifices. But the real test came when, a month into their new life, the rent for the tiny office space he wanted became due. They had managed to borrow a bit from friends and family, but it still wasn't enough. He paced the apartment, phone pressed to his ear, calling everyone he knew. Each time, the response was the same: "I'm sorry, I can't help right now." Tension built in his voice with each failed attempt. She could see the disappointment etched in the lines on his forehead, the fading optimism in his eyes. Late one night, she gathered the nerve to approach him, setting aside her usual gentle demeanor. "We can't keep going like this," she said softly. "We might need to postpone the opening." Her hand rested on his arm, trying to be both comforting and practical. He exhaled, looking away. "I just need more time, that's all." His tone was sharper than usual. The pressure weighed on him like an anvil. "A few more days, and someone will come through." She nodded but couldn't shake the ache in her chest. She believed in him, she truly did, but she also saw the empty fridge, the mounting bills, and the disconnection notices in the mailbox. Days passed without a solution. The night before the rent payment was due, she made a decision. With trembling fingers, she took off her wedding ring, her most precious possession, and tucked it into her purse. That ring symbolized everything she held dear: love, partnership, commitment. Yet she was about to use it as collateral for the dream they both shared. The next morning, while he was making calls, she walked to a pawn shop 3 blocks away. The neon sign buzzed overhead, flickering like her own fading confidence. But she pushed the door open, forced a polite smile at the grim-faced owner, and set the ring on the counter. "I need cash," she said simply. Her voice quivered, but she stayed firm. "Just enough to pay for the first month on an office lease." The owner appraised it for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he named a figure well below the ring's emotional worth. Still, it was enough to bridge the gap. She signed the paperwork, retrieved the bills, and slipped them into her purse. On her way out, she glanced back at the ring under the harsh fluorescent lights, a pang in her heart, and whispered a silent promise to herself: "I'll come back for you." When she arrived home, he was sitting in the dark again, staring at the blank TV screen. His phone lay abandoned on the coffee table. She placed the money in front of him without a word. He looked from the bills to her face, then noticed the empty ring finger. His eyes watered for just a second, an emotion she rarely saw in him, and then he pulled her into a tight embrace. "How did you?" he began. She shook her head against his chest. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "All that matters is that you can secure the office now. Make your dream happen." He wanted to protest, to question her about the ring, but the relief was overwhelming. The next morning, he signed the lease. Their names were nowhere on the documents, just a scrappy business name he'd registered online. Yet in every sense, it was her faith and sacrifice that made it possible. In that cramped apartment, with flickering candles and hearts heavy with uncertainty, she and he held on to the dream. She was the woman behind every hopeful pitch, every sleepless night, and every last borrowed dollar. And though her name was missing from the lease and from the official paperwork, she never once thought she was absent. She believed her essence was woven into every decision, every risk, every plan. Her love and dedication were the real currency fueling this endeavor, and in her mind, that was more binding than any legal document could ever be. From the moment the lease was signed, life adopted a frenetic pace. The tiny office, barely large enough to fit a desk, a couple of chairs, and a battered filing cabinet, became the nerve center for his new venture. A thrift store desk and second-hand computer made up the command station. The walls were still an off-white color that looked more gray than bright, and the overhead fluorescent lights buzzed in a maddening drone. Yet to them, it was a palace of possibilities. Every morning, she rose before dawn to prepare coffee and a quick breakfast. She slipped on her most presentable outfit, still second-hand, but freshly laundered and pressed. Then she traveled with him by bus to the office, ensuring he arrived on time for client meetings. On the bus rides, he would talk excitedly about marketing strategies, brand visions, and how his new consultancy would revolutionize the local business scene. She nodded along, occasionally offering suggestions for flyer designs or local businesses they could partner with. At the office, she was the silent force running everything behind the scenes. While he stood at the front door, greeting potential clients with a confident smile, she was in the back, scouring invoices, balancing the meager budget, and answering phone calls that he missed. She learned how to create spreadsheets and handle basic bookkeeping just by watching online tutorials. The office phone was in her name, an official line that connected them to the outside world. She was meticulous, documenting every client conversation, every purchase order, and every expense. Even if her name wasn't on the company website or the fancy business cards, her influence was everywhere. One day, a client named Mr. Kim walked in, a local restaurateur with dreams of expanding his small diner into a city-wide chain. He was greeted at the door by him, who led Mr. Kim into a stuffy conference room that doubled as a storage area. She rushed to bring them cold water in mismatched glasses and offered a warm, genuine smile. When she left, she heard Mr. Kim comment, "Your assistant is very polite. That's rare these days." She paused for a moment outside the door. Assistant, she repeated in her mind. She wasn't sure what her official title was, maybe she didn't have one. But she knew she was more than just an extra pair of hands. In the evenings, the two of them would return to the apartment. He would drop onto the couch, exhausted from the day's meetings. She would heat up whatever meal she could piece together, rice, a bit of meat if the day's earnings allowed, vegetables seasoned with more love than spices because they couldn't afford fancy ingredients. They would eat in relative silence, too tired to make small talk, yet comforted by each other's presence. One night, she broached the subject of finances. "We need to start saving more," she said, flipping through the stained pages of her notebook. "The rent for this apartment is going up next month." He glanced up, fatigue shadowing his eyes. "I know," he muttered. "I'm trying. We just need one big client, someone who sees the potential in what we offer." She nodded, but worry gnawed at her. The line between personal and business funds was blurred. Sometimes their grocery budget went toward printing flyers or fueling the car he occasionally borrowed from a friend. "Let's consider cutting back on some things," she suggested carefully. He bristled. "We're already barely surviving," he snapped, frustration clear in his tone. Then, seeing the hurt flicker across her face, he softened. "I'm sorry. I just feel like we're so close to something big. I don't want to slow down now." She forced a small smile and resumed her calculations. There was no blame, only a shared sense of urgency. She believed in the vision as much as he did, maybe even more. But the burden of the practical realities, rent, bills, groceries, fell heavily on her. She tried not to resent it. Whenever the weight threatened to crush her, she reminded herself why she was doing this, because she loved him and believed in a future where their sacrifices would pay off. Behind the scenes, she also picked up small side jobs. She found a late-night cleaning gig at a nearby gym, scrubbing locker rooms and mopping floors after midnight. If she felt too tired to continue, she'd tell herself it was temporary, that one day she would have the freedom to rest. In the quiet of her own thoughts, she imagined the life they would build. A real house, financial stability, the sense of security she'd never had growing up. She pictured hosting family gatherings, the hum of lively conversation filling an airy, sunlit living room. In every vision, he was there, proud and grateful, praising her for standing by him. It wasn't always disheartening. There were small victories, A local bakery signed on for a branding package, a budding tech startup agreed to let them handle social media marketing, and a charity event allowed him to give a speech, which generated positive buzz. She was overjoyed each time they landed a client, dancing around the apartment as he read out the contract details. She'd say, "It's happening, it's really happening," while he'd grin and lift her off her feet in a jubilant spin. But inevitably, the bills and late payments reminded them of how fragile their progress was. On more than one occasion, she found herself rummaging through drawers for spare change to buy groceries. She tried to hide it from him so he wouldn't lose faith. If her clothes looked worn, she told herself it was a small price to pay. When money ran tight, she'd skip her own meals, satisfied that he was fed and energetic enough to face the business day. No one outside their small circle knew how much she sacrificed. She was the one who kept the light bill from going into default by negotiating payment plans. She was the one who apologized to clients if he forgot to return a call on time. She was the one who had to calm him when anxiety made him irritable, reminding him that they were on the cusp of something greater than themselves. One evening, as she was sorting through a stack of receipts, he found her perched on the edge of the couch, frowning at the numbers. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said, voice low. She looked up, her expression quizzical. "For what?" "For everything," he replied. "I might be the face of this company, but you're its backbone. You're the one holding it all together." A flicker of warmth spread through her chest. That acknowledgement was all she had been craving, a simple confirmation that her efforts did not go unnoticed, that she wasn't just a silent partner but a critical piece of the puzzle. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We'll build it, together," she murmured, letting those words guide her heart. They sat in comfortable silence, letting hope fill the spaces where uncertainty once lingered. In that moment, she felt seen. She felt that even if the world called her an assistant or overshadowed her, her worth shone brightly for him. She was the woman behind the dream, tirelessly building in the shadows, certain that one day, the light would reach her too. Months turned into a year, and the consultancy began to gain traction. What started as a small trickle of clients evolved into a steady flow of inquiries. Local businesses spoke about the marketing miracle that seemed to happen when they signed on. His presentations were charismatic, his ideas fresh, and his confidence contagious. Meanwhile, she refined the operational side, ensuring smooth follow-ups, timely payment reminders, and impeccable customer service. They could finally afford to keep the lights on at the apartment, and the fridge, though still modest, remained stocked with basics. It felt like each triumph came with a breath of fresh air. The tension in their small home lifted, replaced by an undercurrent of excitement and possibility. But along with the influx of success came something else, a subtle shift in him that she couldn't quite put her finger on. It started with small changes, like the new cologne he wore. She noticed it one morning as he buttoned up his shirt. The scent was bold, more assertive, with a note of exotic spice. It was a far cry from the standard drugstore body spray they used to share. She found herself drawn to it, inhaling deeply when he passed. But she also felt a pang. He hadn't mentioned buying it, and money had still been tight. She decided not to pry, chalking it up to a small indulgence to boost his confidence in meetings. But it didn't stop at the cologne. He started dressing differently, choosing tailored shirts over the simple ones she'd ironed. He spent more time grooming, styling his hair in a way that left her blinking in surprise when he emerged from the bathroom. He took more calls in private, stepping onto the balcony of the office instead of letting her overhear. His phone would buzz late at night, and sometimes he would step out of the apartment to answer. One evening, she confronted him gently. "Is everything okay?" she asked, feigning lightheartedness. "You seem a bit distant these days." He looked up from his phone, surprise etched in his features. "I'm just busy," he said, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Clients call at all hours. You know how it is." She nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, I know. Just checking in." Yet a sliver of unease snaked its way into her heart. She recognized that ambition demanded sacrifice, but she wondered why he seemed to shut her out more and more. Their friends and family noticed the change, too. When she proudly told her parents that the business was now profitable enough to cover expenses, they congratulated her. But when they asked how she was coping with the extra workload, she found it hard to articulate the lingering emptiness that had settled between her and him. Love was supposed to be a shared victory, wasn't it? One Saturday, she scrolled through social media and stumbled upon a photo that made her pause. It was him, standing beside a sleek new car, captioned with, "Hustle pays off. #new ride #business life." The picture had garnered dozens of likes and congratulatory comments. Her chest tightened. She recognized the street in the background. It wasn't anywhere near their apartment or the office. How had he bought a car without her knowing? Where did the money come from? When he finally returned home that evening, he looked elated. "Babe," he said, opening the door with a flourish, "I've got big news." She remained silent, waiting for him to continue. He told her how he secured a lucrative contract with a high-end hotel chain and that the business's projected earnings had skyrocketed. "So I put a deposit on a car," he continued, not noticing her expression. "We need it for all these meetings, and I'll pay the installments from my share of the profits." She swallowed. "I saw the post. Why didn't you tell me before?" She hated how small her voice sounded. He blinked, as though the question surprised him. "It happened fast. I wanted to surprise you." Then he kissed her forehead, trying to smooth over the moment. She smiled weakly, deciding once again not to ruin his excitement. After all, wasn't this what they had worked for? More clients, more recognition, more success? Yet, a weight pressed down on her. The success he basked in felt strangely distant from the partnership they once shared. He no longer asked her opinion about marketing strategies, he no longer discussed their finances in detail. Meetings became closed-door sessions between him and new staff members he hired. She still ran the administrative side, but she sensed the distance growing. She felt as though she was on the outside looking in. Her vantage point was the office hallway, peeking through a crack in the door. One afternoon, a friend dropped by the office and asked her, "Why doesn't your name appear on any of the official documents or website? Aren't you co-founder?" A flush crawled up her neck. "It's just a formality," she replied. "He handles the client-facing stuff, and I manage things behind the scenes." Her friend nodded but looked unconvinced. That night, she mustered the courage to bring it up. She found him sipping a late-night coffee, reviewing something on his tablet. "Should we make it official?" she asked, forcing a tone of cheerfulness. "Put me on the website as a partner?" He looked at her with mild confusion, as though the question had never occurred to him. "I don't know if that's necessary," he said, swirling the coffee in his mug. "You're more of the administrative support, right? You know, making sure everything runs smoothly." Her heart sank at the word support. She had envisioned them as equals, two halves of the same dream. "But I do more than that," she said carefully. "I handle the bookkeeping, the scheduling, the follow-up calls." He nodded but looked distracted. "I appreciate that. But the brand is me, you know? It's built around my personality, my approach to marketing. That's what clients see. It might confuse people to list multiple founders." He shrugged, as though it was obvious. "I'm not dismissing you. I just don't want to complicate the brand messaging." She bit her lower lip, fighting an urge to speak words that would crack the fragile peace. Finally, she whispered, "Okay, I understand," and left the room. She sat on the edge of their bed, tears welling in her eyes, wondering how success could smell so bittersweet, like the cologne he wore, alluring yet strangely foreign. The next few weeks brought more revelations. Expenses that should have gone through her suddenly bypassed her. He started taking weekend business trips, insisting they were critical for networking. He stopped asking her to accompany him, stating that it was best if I handle this alone. Though their bank account was healthier, she felt emotionally impoverished. She tried to share her insecurities with him one evening, attempting to recapture the closeness they'd once had. "Sometimes I feel left out," she admitted, voice trembling. "Like I'm watching you succeed from a distance." He wrapped an arm around her. "Don't be silly. You're part of everything I do," he said smoothly. "I wouldn't be here without you." Yet his words felt rehearsed, as though he'd practiced them for a board meeting rather than for their life together. That night, she stared at the ceiling, recalling the flickering candles in their early days. They had been so broke then, yet so united. Now, they seemed to have more money, more recognition, yet their bond felt alarmingly fragile. She remembered giving up her wedding ring to pay that first office rent. She remembered the night she mopped gym floors. Her hopes had been pinned on a future they would share. Now she wasn't sure if she was even invited into that future. Success smelled different because it was laced with cologne she didn't recognize. The business name was plastered everywhere, but her own name was absent from the narrative. The realization gnawed at her. Maybe he was comfortable leaving her in the shadows all along. It was at the company's one-year anniversary party that she noticed a new figure gliding through the crowd. Dressed in a fitted dress and heels that clicked confidently against the polished floor, this woman radiated an aura of self-assured glamour. She wore her hair in a sleek style, immaculate makeup highlighting every angle of her face. She introduced herself to the guests as the brand expert. Standing by his side, she greeted potential clients with a dazzling smile, her laughter tinkling like polished silverware. Initially, the woman in the background thought nothing of it. He had recently expanded the team, after all. But as the evening wore on, she observed the subtle intimacy that passed between them. A lingering hand on his shoulder, a private joke shared with eyes locked. Something in her gut twisted. She tried to focus on conversation with other colleagues, but her eyes kept drifting to that figure, tall, elegant, and utterly at ease in the spotlight. At one point, she overheard them talking near the hors d'oeuvres table. "You're such a genius," the woman cooed, leaning in closer. "The client absolutely adored your pitch. I just added a little sparkle." He chuckled, tilting his head in a way that was unnervingly familiar. "You bring the sparkle, that's for sure. Glad we make a good team." The word stung, like tiny shards of glass. A good team. That was how he used to describe him and her, back in the days when every small victory was theirs to share. She pressed her lips together, forcing a smile at a colleague who asked her about the catering. She hurried to the kitchen, needing a moment to clear her head. Later in the evening, formal introductions were made. He beckoned her over to where the brand expert stood. "Hey, meet our new star," he said, placing a hand on the woman's arm. "She's been instrumental in polishing our image. Clients love her." The brand expert extended a manicured hand, her smile bright enough to light the room. "So good to finally meet you. I've heard you're the hidden gem around here, handling all the behind-the-scenes work." Something about that statement rubbed her the wrong way, the implication that she belonged solely in the background. She forced a polite nod, swallowing the unease that rose in her throat. In the weeks that followed, the brand expert's presence was everywhere. She accompanied him to client lunches, out-of-town meetings, and networking events. They shared social media posts, each capturing moments of them brainstorming or enjoying casual banter. Her figure became a constant fixture in the office, sashaying past the reception area in a cloud of expensive perfume. Even the staff started to regard her as a co-leader, someone with real clout in the company's direction. Meanwhile, the woman who had poured her soul into this dream found herself pushed further into the administrative corner. When new clients arrived, they asked, "Where's your brand expert?" instead of acknowledging her presence. Office gossip buzzed with remarks about how seamlessly the brand expert and he worked together, how their synergy sparked creativity. And yes, sometimes the rumors hinted at more than just professional chemistry. She tried to ignore the speculation, reminding herself of her unwavering devotion. She had been here from the beginning, offering not just labor but love, not just paperwork but passion. Yet the brand expert seemed to overshadow everything she had built, as though someone had come along and claimed a seat at a table she had set with her own hands. One afternoon, she mustered the courage to approach him about her role in the company. She cornered him in his office, the door half closed, while he was reviewing some design mock-ups. "Hey," she began, voice calm but resolute. "We need to talk about how things are changing around here. I feel like I'm not part of the bigger decisions anymore." He looked up, eyebrows knitted. "We've grown a lot," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I can't loop you in on everything. The brand expert has more experience with public-facing work, and we're trying to scale quickly." Her stomach churned. "But you used to rely on me for all of that," she reminded him. "We built this together. I've been the one making sure the finances, the contracts, the everyday tasks are handled so you can focus on the pitch. And now?" He cut her off gently. "You've done an amazing job, truly. But now we're bringing in top-tier talent, people who can elevate our brand. It's not about excluding you, it's about efficiency. You're still very important, just in a different capacity." She swallowed hard. Different capacity echoed in her mind. It sounded eerily like a polite demotion. That night, she lay awake, the brand expert's polished image haunting her thoughts. Was she overreacting? Was it so wrong that he'd hired someone who could handle public relations and branding with professional flair? After all, the brand expert had the credentials, maybe a marketing degree, maybe contacts in high places. But a deeper part of her sensed that this wasn't just business. The next weekend, she organized a company dinner to celebrate hitting a significant revenue milestone. She tried her best to be a gracious host, welcoming staff, ordering food, making sure everyone felt comfortable. But as the evening unfolded, she watched from the corner of the room as the brand expert charmed everyone with witty anecdotes. At one point, the brand expert linked arms with him, taking a champagne flute and proclaiming a toast to our unstoppable partnership. The staff clapped and cheered. She felt invisible, as though the label's support had been etched onto her forehead. Swallowing her pride, she slipped out the back door to breathe. The night air was cool, and the moon hung low in the sky. She closed her eyes and remembered how, in the earliest days, he used to talk about building an empire together. Now, it felt like that empire had grown, but she was banished to its outer walls. Minutes later, she heard footsteps. She turned to see the brand expert stepping outside, a lithe figure in the moonlight. "You all right?" the brand expert asked softly, eyes searching her face. She forced a tight smile. "Just needed some fresh air." The brand expert nodded. For a moment, there was silence between them. "He talks about you a lot, you know," the brand expert said, fiddling with a ring on her finger. "Says you're the rock. The one who keeps everything stable." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to cling to that small reassurance. But then the brand expert continued, "You should be proud of him. He's come a long way. We make such a great team." The emphasis on "we" knifed through her. "Yes," she managed, trying to maintain composure. "He has come a long way." Without further words, the brand expert slipped back inside, leaving her alone in the darkness. She looked up at the sky, blinking away tears. Something important was slipping from her grasp. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a sense of loss she couldn't yet articulate. Even in the face of growing success, respect, and finances, a chilly wind of suspicion blew through her mind. Was her devotion becoming her downfall? She shook her head, refusing to drown in such thoughts. This was a woman who had pawned her ring, cleaned floors at midnight, and fought tooth and nail to keep them afloat. She wasn't about to let a brand expert's perfectly applied lipstick and sky-high heels erase her from the story she helped create. But as she returned to the celebration, forcing a bright smile for the cameras, she couldn't help but feel that the stage lights were now fixed on someone else, a spotlight thief who had arrived just in time to reap the rewards of a dream she had nurtured. And the worst part, the very man she sacrificed for seemed more than content to let it happen. The final straw fell on her birthday, though she only realized it was the final straw in hindsight. She had dropped subtle hints for a week, she'd left a sticky note on the fridge, circled the date on the wall calendar, and even mentioned how she'd love a quiet dinner for two. Yet the day arrived, and he was nowhere to be found. From morning until late afternoon, she busied herself around their apartment. She vacuumed, wiped the counters, and rearranged the shabby living room furniture. By early evening, she decided to set up something small but special. Candles on the table, a home-cooked meal, some soft music playing through her phone speaker. She even wore the closest thing she had to a nice dress, a simple black outfit she'd bought secondhand but never had the courage to throw away. She waited. And waited. The soup cooled. The candles burned down. 11 o'clock rolled around, and still no text, no call. Each minute felt like a deliberate act of disregard. The loneliness was suffocating, pressing down on her chest until she thought she might cry. But instead of tears, she found a simmering anger, the kind that left her cold and numb. At midnight, she finally blew out the last flickering candle, her heart heavy. She picked up her phone, intending to call him, when she noticed a post on social media. Her chest constricted. There he was, smiling broadly at a swanky lounge, champagne flute in hand. Standing beside him, leaning on his arm as though it were her rightful place, was the brand expert. The caption read, "Celebrating good things ahead." Her fingers trembled. Good things ahead. It was her birthday, and he was out toasting with someone else. Rage, hurt, betrayal, they all fought for dominance in her heart. She closed the app, stared at the dark reflection of herself in the phone screen. The tears that refused to come earlier now pooled at the corners of her eyes. Still dressed in her black dress, she slid down onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. She felt foolish for even making the dinner, for lighting candles, for believing that he would remember. Yet the moment of self-pity swiftly hardened into resolve. She wouldn't cry all night. She'd cried enough over their shared struggles, over his dismissals, over every shred of evidence that he was slipping away. In the quiet hush of the early hours, she made a list, an actual, handwritten list on a piece of notebook paper. It read: gather all financial documents. Check incorporation details. Find a lawyer. Protect yourself. The next morning, he strolled in around 6, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, the scent of high-end cologne mingled with perfume that was distinctly not hers. He blinked in surprise at seeing her awake, fully dressed, seated in the living room, her eyes sharp as knives. "You're up early," he commented, trying to act casual. She held his gaze without flinching. "I never went to bed." Her tone was like ice, each word clipped. He cleared his throat. Had a business meeting that ran late. When she didn't reply, he added awkwardly, sorry if I missed something. Her heart twisted at the gall of that phrase, if I missed something. For a split second, she considered showing him the untouched dinner, the charred candle wicks, the date circled on the calendar. But she decided against it. No words would bring him back to the version of himself she once knew. She stood, pointedly walking toward the bathroom. I have errands, she said flatly, brushing past him. He reached out to touch her arm, but she moved away. He let his hand fall, confusion creasing his features. But he didn't follow her. He went to the bedroom, likely to get some rest after his night of champagne and stolen moments. Later that day, she called her friend, a steadfast ally who had been quietly suggesting for months that she pay closer attention to the structure of the company. The friend put her in touch with a lawyer, an unassuming woman in her 50s with a no-nonsense attitude. When they met in a modest law office, the lawyer wore a plain suit and half-moon spectacles that gave her an air of practicality. Her first words were not unkind, but direct. If your name isn't on anything, you might be in trouble. Let's see what we can find. She produced every receipt she could locate, office supplies, rent checks, even the initial deposit from the pawned wedding ring. The lawyer's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the documents. You've been part of this from day one, she noted, but not officially recognized. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. That's correct. The lawyer typed on her computer, glancing at public business filings, registration details, and minutes from official meetings. Interesting, she said, tapping the screen. There might be a place for you here, if we can prove you were effectively acting as a partner or contributor. A flicker of hope lit in her chest. But do I have a legal claim? She asked. The lawyer removed her spectacles and regarded her solemnly. Potentially. It depends on what we uncover. But it won't be easy. This man you're married to, he's been careful about branding himself as the sole owner. Yet your financial contributions, especially if they were significant or if you can document them, might entitle you to more than you think. She left the law office feeling a strange mix of apprehension and determination. The old her would have felt guilty for even considering legal action against the man she once supported without question. But the new her, the one who stared at untouched soup on her birthday, the one who saw her efforts co-opted by a brand expert, refused to be left with nothing but memories of what could have been. That evening, she returned to the apartment, expecting another cold front. But to her surprise, he was there, dressed casually, pacing the floor as though waiting for her. The moment she entered, he rushed forward. We need to talk, he said earnestly. She put her purse down, nodded curtly. I'm listening. He ran a hand through his hair. I'm sorry about last night. I know it was your birthday. My phone died, and by the time I realized. She held up a hand, cutting him off. Stop. Don't insult my intelligence. He paused, face paling. She waited, her heart pounding, but her expression impassive. Finally, he sighed. Look, I've been under a lot of stress. The company is growing fast, the brand expert is pushing new ideas, and I'm trying to make sure we don't fail. I never meant to hurt you. Her lip trembled, but she steadied herself. Then why does it feel like I don't exist anymore unless you need me to do some back-end task? Why do you flaunt a new car, new cologne, new woman by your side, and never think to include me? He started to speak, but she continued, voice rising. Do you know how many nights I went hungry so we could pay rent? Do you know how many jobs I worked so you wouldn't have to worry about the electricity bill? And now you can't even remember my birthday. His jaw clenched. That's not fair. I'm working for our future. You've benefited from this success too. She laughed, a bitter sound. Benefited? By watching you and her post about celebrating? By reading about your new car on social media? By wearing the same clothes I've had for years? I don't need the fancy things. I need respect. I need to know I matter. For a moment, silence reigned between them. Her eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. Finally, he exhaled. Let's take a break, he said, his tone subdued. Maybe we both need some space. She stood there, stunned. All this time, she had been the one pushing for closeness, for transparency, for them to remain a team. Now he was effectively telling her he needed a break from her. She swallowed the hurt. If that's what you want, she said, her voice hollow. He grabbed a jacket and left the apartment, leaving her alone once again. This time, she didn't sink into despair. She carefully retrieved the list she had written the previous night. Checking off the second step, checking corporation details, she moved on to step 3, find a lawyer. That was already done. The final step read, protect yourself. She stared at those words, feeling both dread and resolve. She wasn't defeated, even if she felt disrespected. The next phase of her life was about to begin, and she would navigate it with a level of shrewdness she never thought she had. No matter how painful the process, she would not be erased from the very dream she had helped bring to life. With the lawyer's guidance, she spent the next few weeks unearthing every speck of evidence that tied her to the company. Old bank statements, tax documents, receipts from suppliers, she dug into them all. Though the official records listed him as the founder, there were undeniable footprints of her involvement everywhere. She discovered something that made her heart pound. In the hurried early days of the company's formation, he had used her credit card to purchase office equipment. She'd signed off on a handful of crucial expenses, renting a photocopier, paying initial design fees for the company's logo, even covering the deposit for the space they'd originally used before moving to a bigger office. The receipts had her name, her card number. The shipping addresses were to the office. The lawyer, reviewing them, pursed her lips and said, "This is helpful. It suggests you had a direct financial stake." Her crowning revelation came when she requested the incorporation documents from the local government office. Buried in the digital filing was a note referencing an original partnership agreement. Her name was typed in as a silent partner with what appeared to be a 51% share. She blinked, rereading it multiple times. 51%. That was a controlling stake. She couldn't believe her eyes. Why on earth would he have set it up that way? And why had it never been mentioned to her again after that initial registration? It dawned on her that he might have done it for favorable reasons, maybe a special business loan or a minority-owned business grant that required her involvement. Or perhaps he'd planned to eventually buy her out. But he had never told her. He had taken her share of the dream and conveniently buried it under piles of day-to-day operations, letting her believe she was powerless. Heart pounding, she took the printed document to the lawyer. "Can you verify this is legitimate?" she asked, voice trembling with barely contained excitement and outrage. The lawyer read it carefully, adjusting her glasses. "It looks official," she said at last. "If this was properly filed and hasn't been amended, you might legally own the majority stake." A mixture of emotions washed over her, anger at the deception, relief that she wasn't legally invisible, and a newfound resolve. The lawyer explained that she would need to petition the court or confront him directly, but as far as the law was concerned, the documents spoke for themselves. Armed with this revelation, she pressed forward. She began quietly alerting clients she was close to, the ones who still remembered her kindness in the early days, sending polite emails to update them on a change in ownership structure. She didn't reveal too much but hinted that they might be hearing more from her. Word trickled through the grapevine, though she never made a grand announcement. She was strategic, cautious. All the while, tension at home grew thick. Since he had suggested they take a break, they spoke in clipped, functional sentences. She would sleep in the bedroom, he on the couch, or vice versa. Some nights, he didn't come home at all. When he did, she felt an undercurrent of guilt in his demeanor, as if he knew something was brewing but didn't have the nerve to confront it. A week later, the brand expert approached her at the office. She had stayed late to organize files in a small side room. "You're here again," the brand expert remarked, stepping into the threshold, arms folded over a sleek blouse. "Burning the midnight oil, I see." She glanced up, heart thrumming. "Yes, lots to do," she said, keeping her voice even. She tried to hide the file of documents she'd been copying. The brand expert offered a plastic smile. "Well, don't work yourself to death. We all appreciate your dedication, but you might want to take some time off. Maybe the stress is affecting your relationship." The veiled condescension made her blood boil, but she simply replied, "Thank you for your concern. I'm fine." As the brand expert turned to go, she added, "By the way, there's a big client presentation tomorrow. He wants me to be there. Are you coming?" She recognized the barb. The brand expert flaunted every opportunity to be in the limelight beside him, while she was left handling grunt work. Taking a breath, she answered, "No, I have other matters to attend to." Alone again, she closed the file cabinet and leaned against it, exhaling. The dynamic in the office was shifting. Some staff treated her with sympathy, perhaps sensing her diminished role. Others barely acknowledged her. It was a far cry from the early days when she was the vital caretaker of every detail. Yet she held a secret now, one that radiated more power than any title they could bestow or withhold. Her friend, the one who first guided her to the lawyer, kept encouraging her to go public with what she'd found. Why delay? the friend asked over a phone call. He's obviously moved on emotionally. You don't owe him anything anymore. You can step in, claim your rights, and fix this place the way you think it should be run. She hesitated, swirling a cup of tea in her hands as she leaned against the apartment's kitchen counter. I'm not sure if I want to blow everything up so dramatically. I invested so much in this relationship, in his reputation. I don't want to. Her friend cut her off gently. He's the one who disrespected you, not the other way around. Sticking up for yourself isn't an act of war, it's an act of self-preservation. She nodded, tears springing to her eyes. She despised how complicated it felt. Love, betrayal, business, pride, it was all tangled in one massive knot. She decided to gather more proof, to be absolutely certain. Over the next week, she systematically scoured the office after hours. She uncovered emails he'd sent from a shared account boasting about how he'd brought his wife on board as a partner, in the early days to secure better business terms. The date matched the incorporation file. She printed them out, methodically adding them to her growing stack of evidence. Then she found the nail in the coffin, a digital folder hidden on the office computer labeled Backup. Inside were scanned receipts from the pawn shop and a note in his handwriting. Repay ring deposit if needed. Reading that line twisted her stomach. He had never repaid it. If anything, he was the one who owed her. She realized he might have always intended to keep track of that ring's value, in case she asked questions later. But he never shared it with her. He likely never thought she'd look there. The next day, she paid another visit to the lawyer, this time presenting the entire compiled docket of evidence. The lawyer's eyes gleamed with approval. You have a solid case, she affirmed. The best approach is to serve notice, let him know you're aware of your majority stake, and see if he wants to settle this privately or drag it through a public legal battle. Her chest fluttered at the idea of confronting him, but she felt stronger with each passing minute. Let's start privately, she said. I want him to look me in the eye when he realizes I know the truth. That night, she returned home, carefully concealing her excitement beneath a calm exterior. He was there, standing by the window, phone in hand. He glanced up briefly. Long day? He asked, his tone distant. She nodded, slipping off her shoes. The subtle tension coiled between them. She set her purse down, opened the fridge, and poured herself a glass of water. He waited, but she gave him no details. If he only knew the storm she was about to unleash. Lying in bed later, she stared at the ceiling and reflected on every sacrifice she'd made. The ring, the nights cleaning floors, the humiliations of being overlooked. The tears she shed were not of defeat, but of final release. After so long being kept in the dark, she finally had a light. And that light was a paper trail, irrefutable proof that she was more than an afterthought. She was, on paper and in truth, the rightful majority owner of the empire he claimed as solely his. The confrontation she planned wasn't the explosive battle many might have expected. There was no public screaming match, no gathering of employees in the conference room to witness the toppling of a false king. Instead, she orchestrated a quiet, methodical unveiling. One afternoon, she politely requested that he join her in the meeting room, just the two of them. The space was glass-walled, overlooking the bustling open-plan office. Employees darted around with files and coffee cups, oblivious to the momentous conversation about to unfold. He entered, looking cautious. "What's this about?" he asked, keeping his voice low. She noticed how he avoided eye contact, as though sensing the tension that lay under her calm facade. She gestured for him to sit across from her at the wooden table. Her heart drummed, but her voice remained steady. "We need to talk about the company. About our roles here." He raised an eyebrow, feigning composure. "Yes, we do. I've been meaning to discuss, well, your responsibilities. Some staff feel unclear about." She slid a folder across the table, cutting him off mid-sentence. He glanced down, confusion etching lines across his forehead. "What's this?" "Documents," she replied simply. "Proof that I'm the majority shareholder. 51%, to be exact." His face drained of color. He flipped open the folder, skimming through the paperwork she'd collected. Incorporation certificates, scanned emails, expense reports. The evidence was indisputable. For a moment, he just stared at the pages, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. When he finally looked up, she saw a mixture of fear and anger in his eyes. "Where, how?" She folded her hands on the table. "I was always there from the start," she said softly. "You might have thought I wasn't paying attention, but I was. And the law was paying attention too. All these receipts, all my personal funds that went into this, it created a paper trail. Then there's the official filing that lists me as majority owner. You hid that from me. You leveraged my involvement for your benefit. His jaw clenched. I never meant to hide. She waved her hand. Stop. Let's not lie anymore. Maybe you didn't think it was important to tell me because you assumed you'd remain in control regardless. Or maybe you assumed I'd never bother to look. He scrambled to regain some composure, pushing the folder away. So what now? Are you going to try and take over? She took a breath, choosing her words with care. I have options. Legally, I could remove you from the board, from day-to-day operations. But I'm not trying to burn everything to the ground. I want a fair resolution. We discuss new terms. We decide how to move forward. His eyes flickered with relief, then wariness. What are you asking for? Full acknowledgement of my position, she said firmly. Changes in how decisions are made. And I want you to step back from certain aspects of the company while we figure this out. He stiffened. You can't run this place alone. We have too many clients, too much at stake. She tilted her chin up, meeting his gaze. Don't underestimate me. Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Outside, employees passed by, tapping on their phones, carrying on their normal day. Inside, an entire empire's power structure was being redefined. Finally, he closed the folder, exhaling shakily. We'll talk terms, he conceded, voice low. No lawyers yet. Let's keep this between us. Her eyes narrowed. I already have a lawyer, but I'd prefer to settle privately if we can. This company matters to me, whether you acknowledge it or not. I built it with my sweat and tears, same as you, maybe more. He nodded, adjusting his collar. All right. Let's meet after work. She stood, taking back the folder. Fine. But know this, nothing is the same anymore. Then she walked out of the meeting room, head held high. In the ensuing days, she didn't broadcast the conversation. The brand expert and the staff only sensed a shift in the atmosphere. He was subdued, less cocky. She moved through the office with quiet authority, calmly rearranging certain processes and taking direct meetings with clients who once only dealt with him. Some staff looked puzzled, even uneasy, but she carried herself with unwavering certainty. Outside of work, her transformation was equally understated yet powerful. She didn't splurge on a luxurious makeover. She took her worn blazer to a tailor, had it refitted to her frame. She didn't buy flashy new shoes, she polished her best pair until they gleamed. She upgraded her old phone to a functional but modest model that allowed her to manage emails more efficiently. Every move she made was deliberate, not for show but for substance. Her personal life also underwent a recalibration. She started reading books on leadership and entrepreneurship, staying up late not out of desperation, but out of a desire to expand her mind. When doubt crept in, when she questioned whether she was bold enough, smart enough, she remembered the nights she spent hunched over a candlelit table, the time she pawned her wedding ring, the humiliations she endured. She had more grit than anyone could imagine, and grit was a currency far more valuable than fleeting charm. One evening, after the office had emptied, the brand expert found her in the conference room again. This time, she had her laptop open, reviewing financial forecasts. She looked up, noticing the brand expert's hesitant approach. Working late? The brand expert asked, trying to sound casual. She nodded, giving a polite but reserved smile. Yes. There's a lot to catch up on. The brand expert lingered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. He's been distant lately. Is everything okay? She paused, choosing her words carefully. It's just business, she said. We're restructuring. The brand expert's face pinched briefly before she forced a bright expression. I see. Well, if you need help with any brand-related initiatives, let me know. I'd be happy to collaborate. The tone was carefully diplomatic. Thank you, she replied, returning her gaze to the screen. She sensed the brand expert trying to glean more information, but she offered none. Moments later, the brand expert left, her perfume trailing behind. Alone again, the new majority owner of the company felt a surge of resolve. She had no interest in petty revenge or dramatic takedowns. Her transformation was not loud, not something meant for tabloids or gossip columns. It was a quiet shift of power, as unstoppable as the tide. She was stepping into her role, reclaiming her name, and refusing to be the silent shadow any longer. The next day, she made an important decision. She drafted an internal memo for the staff, announcing changes in leadership structure. She introduced herself formally as a co-founder and majority shareholder, detailing how the company would move forward with collaborative leadership. She never once insulted him or minimized his contributions. Instead, she praised the team for their hard work and assured them that this shift was in the company's best interest. Some employees looked shocked when they read the memo. Others smiled, clearly relieved to see her stepping into the light. The brand expert's reaction remained veiled, a polite smile that revealed little. But the difference in the office was palpable. They began addressing her with a new level of respect, realizing that the assistant label was now obsolete. As she signed off the memo, she felt a pang of sadness for what had been lost in her personal life. Yet a sense of empowerment coursed through her veins. The transformation was happening, and it didn't need a spectacle. It only needed steadfast determination and the truth on her side. The city's annual business gala was an event known for glitz, glamour, and high-stakes networking. Invitations were coveted, as the event drew top investors, influential leaders, and media representatives. When their company received an invite, it was addressed, much to everyone's surprise, to both him and her. Traditionally, she might have declined such a spectacle. She had never been one for ostentatious displays, preferring to let others bask in the spotlight. But this year was different. She saw the gala as a strategic opportunity to showcase her newfound position. She accepted the invitation on behalf of the company without hesitation. Rumors circulated among the staff about whether both he and the brand expert would attend. Some whispered that it would be awkward, given the recent leadership shakeup. Others speculated that she planned to make a big public statement. She let them talk. She had her own plans, meticulously set in motion. In the weeks leading up to the event, she didn't splurge on an expensive designer gown. Instead, she commissioned a local seamstress to create a tasteful, elegant dress from fabric that had a subtle shimmer when touched by light. It wasn't a bold color, it didn't feature extravagant sequins or lace. But it was crafted to fit her body perfectly, an understated statement of confidence. On the night of the gala, she arrived fashionably late, stepping out of a taxi rather than the flashy car some guests pulled up in. The red carpet was already buzzing with photographers. She inhaled a steadying breath, then made her entrance with poise. Flashbulbs popped, capturing her calm smile and the quiet glimmer of her dress. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her, scanning her face, trying to place this new figure in the business scene. Inside the grand ballroom, chandeliers sparkled overhead as men in tailored suits and women in dazzling gowns mingled. Waiters in white gloves maneuvered through the crowd with trays of champagne. She spotted him almost immediately. He was flanked by the brand expert, who wore a dress dripping with crystals. They were engaged in conversation with a cluster of executives, looking every bit the power duo the gossip columns had painted them to be. She could have walked straight up to them, but she chose to make her own rounds. She greeted investors who knew her name from the new leadership memo, clients who recognized her warm voice from countless phone calls. Each conversation was a chance to quietly assert her authority. She was gracious, poised, yet unapologetically in control. Half an hour later, she was sipping champagne when a hush seemed to ripple through part of the crowd. Turning, she saw that he and the brand expert had noticed her presence and were heading her way. The brand expert's polished smile faltered for a split second, enough to reveal a flash of insecurity. He wore a measured expression, as though bracing for confrontation. "Wow," the brand expert cooed, eyeing her dress. "You look stunning." She offered a small smile. "Thank you," she replied. "You, too." He stepped forward, clearing his throat. "I didn't expect to see you here so soon. Thought you might be busy." She raised an eyebrow. "Busy? I'm sure I can balance attending an important event for a company I co-own." The words were pointed, though her tone remained cordial. They stood there, an awkward trio in the middle of a grand ballroom. She felt multiple sets of eyes lingering on them, the tension practically a spectacle in itself. Slowly, a few curious observers tried to edge closer, hoping to overhear. Breaking the tension, she extended a hand to the brand expert. "Shall we network together? I'm sure we can present a united front to potential investors." The brand expert accepted her hand with a hesitant nod, forcing a bright grin. "Yes, of course. Unity is key." For a time, they circled the room, greeting people as a collective. She found it almost surreal to walk side by side with the two individuals who had caused her so much anguish. Yet she refused to shrink away. If anything, she stood taller, exuding a quiet strength that no one could ignore. Occasionally, she caught him glancing at her with a mixture of confusion and perhaps a glint of admiration. This was a side of her he had rarely witnessed, unafraid, self-possessed, and ready to claim her space. The evening's program featured speeches from prominent business leaders. Then came a segment to highlight rising companies in the region. She felt her pulse quicken when the MC called out the name of their company. "We have here tonight one of the region's fastest-growing marketing consultancies," the MC boomed. "Would like to invite the founders to the stage to say a few words about their journey." In past events, he would have stepped up alone, or perhaps with the brand expert. But this time, she walked confidently toward the stage, her footsteps echoing in the silent hall. He and the brand expert exchanged a brief, tense look and followed, though it was clear no one had prescripted what would happen next. Standing at the podium, she felt every bit of her past flooding her mind: the candlelit dinners in a tiny apartment, the pawned ring, the days cleaning offices after hours. She took a breath, pressing her trembling hands against the podium. The crowd waited expectantly. She began, voice steady, "Good evening. This company started with 2 people, a borrowed computer, and faith that we could change how marketing was done in this city." She paused, letting her words sink in. Over time, it grew, thanks to the contributions of many talented individuals. But more than that, it thrived on sacrifices made behind the scenes. Her gaze flicked to him and then to the brand expert. Often, the world sees a polished story of success. Yet behind every triumph, there are nights of doubt and days of unwavering commitment. "I stand here tonight, not just as someone who typed invoices or answered phones, but as a co-founder and majority stakeholder, a role I once underestimated in myself." A few murmurs rippled through the audience. The brand expert's face remained carefully neutral. He shifted uneasily, but she continued. "We're honored to be recognized as a rising force in this industry," she concluded. "I thank everyone who believed in us, and everyone who didn't. Because both have driven us to become better. Here's to growth, to truth, and to partnerships built on respect." With that, she stepped back from the microphone. Polite applause filled the room, but the hush that followed was thick with intrigue. She caught the eyes of several influential figures, some nodded in admiration. She had delivered the message with a gentle, yet resolute punch. No grand drama unfolded on stage. She didn't fling accusations, she simply spoke the truth. That alone carried more weight than any public confrontation could. She didn't need to brag about her 51% share or detail how she'd been wronged. Her mere presence in that moment, and the calm declaration of her role, was enough to reshape the narrative. When they left the stage, the MC thanked them, promising to follow the company's future with great interest. In the crowd, cameras flashed, capturing the trio's tense unity. She felt the brand expert's nerves beside her and sensed the conflict simmering under his polished exterior. The rest of the night passed in a blur. In conversations with potential clients, she no longer lurked in the background. She offered business cards printed with her new title, co-founder and managing partner. The brand expert watched with forced smiles. He said little, clearly unsure how to navigate this new dynamic. She recognized that her star was rising, not through glitz or manipulation, but through the unassailable power of simply being who she was supposed to be all along. By the time she left the gala, the city's skyline glimmered outside. She stepped back into a taxi, the soft rustle of her shimmering dress a reminder of how far she'd come. She had walked into that grand ballroom feeling like someone who had been robbed of her narrative. She walked out knowing she had reclaimed it, and the world had noticed. 2 days after the gala, word had spread throughout the local business community about her poised, yet startling, declaration of majority ownership. She became the subject of hushed conversations in cafe lines and enthusiastic debates at networking mixers. Everyone wanted to know, who was this woman? Where had she been hiding? The irony wasn't lost on her, she'd never really been hiding, she had just never been given the platform to speak. He had been avoiding her since that night, slipping into the office at odd hours or ducking behind urgent meetings that somehow never involved her. Meanwhile, the brand expert kept her distance as well, maintaining a polite front during mandatory interactions but otherwise steering clear. The tension in the office felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. The spark came in the form of a shareholders' meeting she called, citing her 51% stake. It was time to discuss the company's future and make a pivotal decision about leadership. When the meeting day arrived, everyone who mattered was present: board members, key investors, top management. The brand expert sat near him, looking uncharacteristically anxious. She took a seat at the head of the long, polished table, a seat she had never occupied before, but one that was rightfully hers. "Thank you for attending," she began, voice steady. "I've called this meeting to address the future direction of our consultancy and to clarify leadership roles." He leaned forward, jaw tight. I think we all know you've made your position clear, but we need to discuss how to handle day-to-day operations. We can't just. She lifted a hand, halting him. Then, reaching into a slim folder, she extracted a set of signed documents. I've prepared a motion, she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. To restructure the board, with myself as the chairman, and to effectively manage the next phase of this company. A ripple of whispers spread among the attendees. The brand expert's expression hardened. She continued, I value the contributions everyone here has made, including the brand expert, who has a role to play, if she wishes. And of course, to the man who has been the public face of the company. She looked at him squarely. But we must operate on transparency and mutual respect. Going forward, decisions will be made with full board approval, and my role as majority shareholder will be recognized in all public and private documents. He clenched his fists, glancing around the table at the wide-eyed board members, none of whom seemed willing to challenge her. She was the largest voting share, after all. If anyone tried to side against her, they risked losing their stake. Money talked, and so did official documents. You can't just come in and override everything, he hissed, but there was no force behind his words, just desperation. I built. We built, she corrected, her tone never wavering. And if we're going to continue building, we must do it right. A board member finally spoke up. I see no issue with this restructuring, especially given the documentation. It's in the best interest of the company to ensure compliance and harmony at the leadership level. The brand expert opened her mouth as if to argue but found no supportive eyes in the room. Reluctantly, she leaned back in her chair. With that, the vote was held. Predictably, the motion passed almost unanimously, with only him and one other uncertain voice abstaining. The sense of finality in that room was palpable. She felt a surge of vindication, but she kept her composure. No triumphant smile, no gloating. Just a quiet nod of acknowledgement. After the meeting, as attendees filed out, she asked him to stay behind. When they were alone in the conference room, she slid another envelope across the table. He eyed it warily. What is this now? My divorce papers, she said softly. I'm done waiting for respect in this marriage. You've made it clear you're more interested in celebrating with others and neglecting what we built personally. His face went pale. You're leaving me? Tears threatened to surface, but she blinked them away. She had done her grieving in private, spent too many nights in silent agony. You left me long before I decided to do this, she whispered. I'm just making it official. He looked at the envelope, then at her, as if searching for a last glimmer of the woman who once sacrificed everything for him. She offered no trace of regret. I have a lawyer, she continued. All the details regarding the split of our personal assets are included. We can negotiate amicably, or you can contest it. But I believe I've shown you I'm not afraid to fight for what's rightfully mine. He exhaled, bowing his head. For a moment, he appeared broken, stripped of the swagger he once wore so confidently. This isn't how I wanted it to end, he mumbled. Her voice remained firm. It's how it's ending, she said, gathering her documents. And now we both have to live with it. She left him there, standing in the echoing emptiness of the conference room. On her way out, a few employees offered her encouraging nods. She paused to let the brand expert pass by, who averted her gaze. Soon after, she walked into the open lobby where staff were filing about, phone calls and hushed conversations filling the air. She didn't announce anything. She didn't need to. Word spread in minutes that there had been a dramatic shift. Some called it a coup, others a rightful claiming of power. Regardless of the label, the outcome was the same. She was in command, and everyone had to adjust accordingly. Yet there was no immediate sense of triumph for her. She felt relief, yes, but also the weight of responsibility. She had spent so long living in someone else's shadow, she now had to learn to cast her own. She stepped outside, letting the afternoon sun warm her face. A slight breeze carried the scent of fresh beginnings. She recalled a line she once heard about how real victories don't always come with parades. Sometimes, they come quietly, in the form of a signature on a legal document, or a calm declaration of ownership before a boardroom. Or in the final sealing of an envelope that said, I'm choosing myself this time. And indeed, that was the ultimate MIC drop, walking away with not just her name, but her dignity, her future, and her sense of self intact. Months passed. The legal proceedings for the divorce were set in motion. He moved out of their apartment, leaving behind boxes of memories she carefully sorted through. The brand expert eventually resigned, citing irreconcilable creative differences, though rumors suggested it was more about her not wanting to work under a woman she once belittled. In the end, the company's day-to-day management fell to a small leadership team she handpicked, people who valued collaboration and humility. She didn't rush into buying a lavish home or flaunting newfound wealth. Instead, she bought back her mother's old house, the one her family had lost years ago. The day she received the keys, she stood on the creaky porch, tears welling in her eyes. She vowed to restore it, to fill it with love and warmth. That house was her reminder of everything she overcame, a tangible symbol that she could reclaim what once seemed lost. For a while, she avoided social media. The chatter had turned her into an urban legend, the silent wife who became the boss, the unstoppable underdog. A local journalist requested an exclusive interview, wanting to spin her story into a cautionary tale or a triumphant saga. She declined politely. She wasn't interested in sensationalizing her journey. She knew her story was more nuanced than any headline could capture. One afternoon, she stopped by a small nursery on the edge of town and bought a pot of mint. The fresh scent reminded her of resilience. Mint always found a way to thrive, even in less than ideal conditions. She placed the pot on the windowsill in her new kitchen. Every morning, as she brewed her coffee, she inhaled the invigorating aroma of mint, letting it ground her in the present and remind her of how far she'd come. Her path occasionally crossed with him. Once, she saw him at a business expo, looking a bit thinner, more subdued. He seemed uneasy, forced to carry on as a consultant without the weight of the company's brand behind him. Another time, she spotted him at a cafe, sitting alone, a coffee growing cold at his table. She didn't approach him. She simply observed, remembering a time when she would have rushed in with comforting words. Now, she realized, that role no longer belonged to her. The city gossips eventually found new stories to chase. Another entrepreneur soared to fame, a scandal erupted in a major corporation, and the world moved on. Yet within the corners of the industry, her name commanded respect, less through loud proclamations and more through whispered acknowledgments of her integrity and grit. One late afternoon, as she navigated the grocery aisles, she nearly bumped carts with him and the brand expert. She blinked, momentarily stunned to see them together again. The brand expert wore an overdone outfit and heavy makeup that did little to hide the fatigue etched on her face. He looked tired, the lines on his forehead more pronounced than ever. They both froze, uncertain how to react. She offered a polite nod, stepping aside. They stared at her for a moment, perhaps seeking answers in her expression. She simply smiled, an expression of peace, not triumph. Then she returned to her shopping, leaving them behind. In her mind, there was nothing left to say. She had moved on from their drama, and she suspected they were still ensnared by it. Later that evening, as she unpacked her groceries, she paused to look out the window at her potted mint. She thought about the woman she used to be, quiet, giving, willing to bend until she almost broke. She didn't regret being that woman, it was all part of her evolution. But now she was someone else entirely, still kind, still empathetic, but fiercely protective of her worth. No, she didn't wear a crown, nor did she need one. She had something far more valuable, self-respect, authority over her own life, and a renewed sense of purpose. The ring she once pawned might never return to her finger, but she had reclaimed something infinitely more precious, her identity. As she curled up on her sofa, sipping a cup of mint tea, her phone buzzed with a message from the lawyer. The final divorce papers were ready to be signed. A wave of relief rolled over her. After so many months of upheaval, she was finally free to close that chapter. She typed back a simple reply, "I'll stop by tomorrow." Setting her phone aside, she took another sip of tea, letting the warmth settle in her chest. She was alone, but she wasn't lonely. She had her company, her dreams, and her unwavering belief in what she could achieve when she refused to remain silent. They had mocked her for being too ordinary, too supportive, too invisible. But they forgot that foundations are built in quiet places, and that once a foundation is solid, nothing built upon it can ignore its strength. She didn't gloat over her victory. She simply glowed, allowing the serenity of knowing her own value to radiate from within. And in that gentle, unspoken power, she found a new beginning, one that didn't require anyone's permission, a half-shared spotlight, or a glittering crown to make her worthy of the dream she had rightfully reclaimed. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment your thoughts and share. See you in the next story. AFRITALES by Moonlight.